And now let's look at an example. Okay. So we have nature, and nature chooses a type, T1 or T2, chooses a type of sender, T1 or T2, with a positive probability. So it chooses type sender T1 with P, probability P, and T2 with probability 1 minus P. And then each type of sender chooses a message, M1 or M2, M1 or M2, and then a receiver who's at an information set, because they don't observe the type, so the receiver, after observing M1 and M2, then gets to choose an action, A1 or A2, A1 or A2, A1, A2, A1, A2. So this is exactly how the Beer-Quiche game is set up. And in this game, we have a set of types, T, T1, and T2. We have a set of messages that the sender can choose from, M1 and M2. And we have a set of actions that then the receiver can choose from, A1, A2. And we also have the nature probability, which is the probability of T1 being P. So in this scenario, each type, both the sender and the receiver have 4 pure strategies that they can choose from, okay? So both sender and receiver have 4 pure strategies to choose from. So the sender's pure strategies are either play or choose M1, which is choose the message M1, if nature draws type T1 of sender, and play also M1 if nature draws type 2 of the sender. So this strategy is if nature draws M1, if nature draws T1, then the sender chooses message M1, and if nature draws T2, then the sender also chooses M1. Okay, so this is this strategy. There's another strategy, pure strategy, which is for the sender to play M1 if nature draws T1, and M2 if nature draws T2. So this strategy is if nature draws T1, sender chooses M1, but if nature draws T2, sender chooses M2. And you can see where I'm going with this. And then there's a third strategy for the sender where the sender chooses message M2 if nature draws T1, and the sender chooses message M1 if nature draws T2. Sorry, this is, yeah, okay. So in this strategy, if nature draws T1, then the sender plays M2, chooses message M2, and if nature draws T2, then the sender plays M1. So it's the opposite of the initial, the one just before it. And then there's a fourth strategy where the sender plays or chooses message M2 if nature draws T1, and chooses M2 again if nature draws T2. And that strategy is nature draws T1, then sender chooses M2, and if nature draws T2, then sender also chooses M2. The receiver's four pure strategies are that they play A1, action 1, if the sender chooses message 1, and play action A1 if sender chooses message 2. So this strategy is the receiver choosing A1, whether the sender chooses M1 or M2. So the receiver playing A1 regardless of what message the sender chooses. And then there's the second strategy where the receiver chooses A1 if the sender chooses M1, and plays A2 if sender chooses M2. And there's a third strategy where the receiver plays A2 if the sender chooses, if the sender chooses M1, and plays A1 if the sender chooses M2. And the fourth strategy is the receiver plays A2 if the sender chooses message 1, and the receiver plays A2 if the sender chooses M2.